Thanks everybody for joining. The session will also be recorded, so I'll be sending that out afterwards if you missed any of it or if you have a colleague who wanted to watch it but couldn't make it. Today we're joined by Mark Orchison, who's the CEO and founder of Nine. And the session will be on artificial intelligence and the impact of new laws and regulations on schools. So you can take it away when you're ready.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining. This really is a session for you. Like, I'm going to talk through a range of different components specifically to do with the EU AI Act, but also how regulation is changing around the world, and also some of the things that we're doing here at Nine. But at any time as we go through this, please do ask questions or interrupt me so that you feel that you're getting as much as you can from this. I will talk about some of the things that Nine do, what we are doing. And one of the things that we have launched is whole school training on AI. It looks a bit like this. This is the video and the training materials that we have. But in the chat now, I've put a link to the curriculum, and you can start trialing the training program. There are 22 courses split between beginner, whole school, intermediate, heads of department, advanced, people coordinating AI in schools, and specialist, safeguarding, AI implications on safeguarding, that sorts of thing. So I'll just put that in there just for you to take a look at. And if you want to join the trial from the 27th of November, you can. And then the product is launched in January. But that's really as much as I'm going to touch upon what we do here at Nine. What we're going to start off with is a bit of context. This is just a video around how AI at this moment in time can be integrated into just common technology. And I just want you to think about some of the implications of this in your school, and maybe from like a security and safeguarding lens. That's what I wanted to bring it to life. So I'm just going to jump out of this and we're just going to press play on this video. And if I press... it's only a couple of minutes long, and it's quite interesting if you've not seen this before. So here we go.
We built glasses that let you identify anybody on the street. The information a tool collects from just a photo of your face is staggering. To use it, you just put the glasses on, then as you walk by people, the glasses will detect when somebody's face is in frame. This photo is used to analyze them, and after a few seconds, their personal information pops up on your phone.
Oh, this is me volunteering.
June Lee, right?
Yeah. Oh.
You're
This photo was great. This is like
you're from Bergen County Academies?
Yeah.
Your Korean name is Ju Yoon?
Cambridge Community. Oh, hi. No? Wait, are you Betsy?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think I met you through like the Cambridge Community Foundation, right? Yeah. It's great to meet you. I'm Kane.
Oh wait. Do you happen to be the person working on like minority stuff for like Muslims in India at all or something? Yeah. Really? Yeah. Are you Kashif? Yes. Oh, I've read your work before. That's super cool. I'm Andrew. Nice to meet you. Oh, I love.
Yeah, forgetting.
Oh. Are you Sarah Chan?
No.
So here's how it works. We stream the video from the glasses straight to Instagram and have a computer program monitor the stream. We use AI to detect when we're looking at someone's face. Then we scour the internet to find more pictures of that person. Finally, we use data sources like online articles and voter registration databases to figure out their name, phone number, home address, and relatives' names. And it's all fed back to an app we wrote on our phone.
Using our glasses, we were able to identify dozens of people, including Harvard students, without them ever doing it. Here's some of our favorites.
Was Secretary of Transportation. That was like when she was getting.
Wait, what's her Instagram?
Delayed child.
Yeah, okay.
Is your address 4 Valley?
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia?
Yeah.
Is
oh my God. Yes. But yes.
also attended Yale's Young Global Scholar Summer Program.
Really?
Yeah, these are me in like middle school.
Oh my God. What about John and Susan? Are they your
Those are my parents.
parents? Okay, cool.
So I'm just going to stop that there and jump back into the deck. the reason for showing you that is that's just through normal they're Ray-Ban glasses that you can buy now, linked into Instagram, and that anyone can really build that sort of technology using AI to harvest a significant amount of data. And as schools, then there are a number of different implications. First of all, there's the implication of how you as a school are currently creating the digital footprint of children and staff, and how that data can be interrogated currently using AI to build an identity based upon anyone getting access to that data that you are presenting, that you are responsible for. But also there's the implications over time. So as those children go through your school, go to university, if you're just thinking about how AI can get access to that data and give information to someone to either build trust or rapport with either children or other members of staff in your community, what are the implications in 5, 10, 15 years time as that technology matures, and there are potential risks that as a school you are creating in your use of data, but also in your interactions with technology and AI. And it's not to say that there's people within your school, either students or staff, that are using this type of technology just to try it out and see how it can work, and what benefits or also dangers it can create for school. And when we're looking at AI regulation and specific laws, and specifically within the EU, how many of you are in a school in the EU? Interesting. There's one. I can't see anyone else's video, but let's say there's a handful. What the EU have tried to do is take a lead in terms of the regulation, and they are probably ahead more than most other countries when it comes to law, and they are trying to do like a first mover advantage, much like the GDPR. So the EU AI Act is structured very similarly in terms of recitals and articles. Those are like the structures of the law as the GDPR, and it quite nicely links together. If you look in the UK, where I'm based, we're not following the EU regulations anymore. Our law is what's called more of a principle-based law, in terms of there are 5 principles, and then at a regulator level, so the schools regulator, the health regulator, those specific markets at that level, they are coming up with guidance in terms of what is right or what is wrong when it comes to AI. But at an EU level, there are like rules. So it's like black and white. This is right. This is wrong. This is what you need to be. This is what you need to be doing. And interestingly, the EU AI Act has put in specific obligations on schools with specific milestones. So for February 2025, you are no longer allowed to use specific types of AI. And then from August 2025, you have to evaluate at a technical level and a functional level the types of AI that you're using, and be able to identify what the risks are. But also you have to train your staff. So the course that I've showed there in terms of that's available, the 22 courses, you're going to, if you don't use our course, you're going to have to use something different in order to be compliant with the EU AI Act, and to mitigate any potential regulatory action. And obviously within the EU AI Act, there are fines of up to 7% of turnover, or 35 million euros, whatever's higher. And the penalties that the EU has structured around AI are far more punitive than they were for the GDPR. So it has a higher level in terms of tolerance. A higher threshold, should I say, or lower threshold, higher penalties. Now, within the EU AI Act, there are 2 definitions. There's what's called a provider, and an AI provider is like ChatGPT, or it could be if you use any sort of EdTech platform, Power, School, Veracross, Final Sight, OpenApply, and those guys are embedding AI into their platforms, which many of them are. They then become a provider of AI to you as a school, and you as a school are what's called the deployer. You are making decisions to deploy the AI within your community, and consequently, because you are you have that definition, you are aligned to that definition of a deployer, you have specific responsibilities to you in terms of the decisions you're making about using AI in your school, and certain liabilities that you are accepting. certain liabilities that you're accepting from in relation to your parents and your students and your staff, but also there are certain liabilities that you are taking from the provider of the AI. So if the provider of the AI has trained the model and its data sets in a specific way, you are taking on those liabilities in deploying that within the school, because you essentially are accepting that you have read and understand how the AI has been trained. You are accepting and you understand the risks that that AI could generate, those risks that could be had both on the users, your students and staff. So it's quite important that you understand those sorts of things, but there are certain things that you need to be doing in order to be compliant with those particular laws. The EU AI Act has structured AI following a particular risk model. So they have what's called unacceptable risk all the way down to minimal risk. And importantly, they've classified most AI that has an influence over education as in the high risk category. And depending on what the category is, there are specific obligations for you as a school. So if it's unacceptable risk, you can't use it. And by, or from, should I say, around February 2025, I think it's the 1st of February 2025, you can't use any unacceptable risk AI in your school. What's possible, though, is because at the moment, many people are playing around and experimenting with AI. It could be teachers, it could be students, it could be anyone on the administrative side of the school. Most schools we speak to don't know what AI is being used. They know that there may be AI in specific platforms, but they don't know whether individual members of staff are playing around with AI for lesson planning or anything else. And consequently, you have a lack of span of control around how you are using AI, what data is going into that at a school level. And basically what the EU is saying from February 2025, you can't have that. You have to have controls around who is using AI, what models they're using, a policy that manages that approach. So in order to be compliant with the law, and I'm guessing that 90% of schools aren't going to be in this bucket, they won't be compliant by Feb 2025, you have to have a list of all of the AI that is being used, and you have to have a mechanism whereby people are approved to be using specific AI models or to putting data into those specific models. Then, based upon the timescale of compliance, as I said, August 2025, you have to be in a position that you can evaluate the technical and the functional documents that you get from AI providers and make a decision around the risks that AI is generating for your staff and for your students. What that's going to mean in practice is between, let's say, March and August, you are likely going to receive these functional and these technical documents from providers of AI or EdTech platforms to say, this is the AI that we're using, you're going to read this, and by you continually using our system, you are accepting liability and compliance with the EU AI Act. Much like what happened with the GDPR, when EdTech providers had to be compliant with the GDPR, their terms and conditions got updated, their privacy notices got updated. Those were forced onto schools or handed over to schools, and by you continually using those platforms, you are accepting those terms. So whether you decide, as a proactive basis to be engaging and reviewing those contracts or reviewing those technical and functional documents, by the virtue of you continually using those platforms, and this is all of the main platforms you use, not only the ones that go across all school, like your student information system, but curriculum-based, maths, literacy, any types of games-based learning, the functional and the technical documents around those platforms are going to come your way. And you need to be understanding and managing the risks in terms of the AI that is being used. From a high risk here, as I said, the EU AI Act specifically defines high risk in AI, and there are specific categorizations of that. And you need to be, or someone within your school, a group of people within your school need to be aware of those and be able to manage whether you have high risk or low risk. Importantly, after the start of the next academic year, you also need to be making people aware. So much like in your privacy notice, you make people technologies that you have within school, and you have to be able to demonstrate that you have evaluated those AI platforms. And within the EU, much like people have information rights, so they can come to your school and they can come and say, give me the list of all the AI that's being used, show me how you've evaluated it, tell me what the risks are, tell me how you are managing those risks. And if you can't do that exercise, then you're not compliant with the EU AI Act. And in theory, or they can then complain to your local regulator, whether that be your data protection regulator, or whether it be your there'll be an AI regulator that probably sit within the data protection regulator, and consequently they can then carry out an investigation. So there's quite a lot of things that are going on to really force schools and every other organisation within the EU to be compliant with the EU AI Act. Interestingly, when you look at all other countries around the world, including the UK, everyone else has to do generally the same thing, except within the US. Every organisation has to do generally the same thing, albeit it's not as black and white. So all the things I've just said are generally requirements in law, or through inspection, or through some other mechanism in most other countries. The Middle East, the UAE, Kingdom Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Japan, a lot of those territories have a similar requirement, but it hasn't been so black and white in terms of these are the buckets of high risk down to unacceptable risk down to low risk, and they haven't been specific as in terms of the deadlines that you have to meet, which is interesting, but it also gives way for there to be a lot more interpretation about what you should be doing as a school in those other territories, where the EU is very, very specific. You do not do these things by this date, there's going to be a punishment. And we expect as an organisation that the punishment for organisations not complying with the EU AI Act will be a lot swifter and quicker than it was for the GDPR. So within the GDPR, it probably took from 2018 4 to 5 years for the regulator to start fining organisations and specifically schools for non-compliance. We expect that to be a lot swifter with AI because of the punitive damage that misuse of AI, certainly putting personal data into AI can have. And this slide just sort of goes on, just sort of emphasises the fact that there's a regulatory framework in the EU, but in the UK it's more of a principles based, but you still have to do exactly the same thing. You are getting pushback from big tech on the EU AI Act, and I've not necessarily had a conversation with a lot of the big EdTech vendors who provide like student information systems to international schools within the EU, or in the final sites open apply. I know many of them are considering the implications for it, because for them and their business, it adds another layer of regulation, and is more punitive to them to trade and to have contracts in the EU than anywhere else. What we're seeing with big tech is we're seeing a push against this. So you see Meta, Apple not providing or not deploying their most advanced AI tech to the EU and also the UK because of the punitive nature of the regulation that is being created, which in itself will raise questions as to will the big EdTech vendors that provide services to schools, will they actually accept the liability that's going to pose on them if they're using AI in their products, and will they continue to service the EU market? We saw with the GDPR that there were a very small number, maybe 2 or 3 big US vendors that decided against continue to trade in the EU and therefore stop their services. Not necessarily think that's going to happen with AI, but there will certainly be probably a delay in many EdTech vendors actually accepting the liability for the EU AI Act, which in many cases will enhance the risk for schools using those vendors who don't comply with the EU AI Act from August 2025. So just from a compliance perspective, the level of risk is likely going to increase for schools in the EU that are using a lot of EdTech from the US, because those vendors may not want to be compliant, but you are essentially holding on to the risk of using those platforms, and you'll have to do some sort of evaluation around that over the beginning of the next calendar year before the start of the next academic year. With the use of AI, and obviously with its advancement, you are getting this thing called AI nationalism. Some of those components that I sort of spoke about in the previous slide were to do with the fact that the regulations are more punitive in the EU. But at a geopolitical level, there are certain countries that are being restricted access to the latest AI, whether that be the latest hardware that allows you to run the latest models or those sort of greatest things. But specifically with an organization such as ECIS that has schools globally, it's possible and probably likely that there'll be some countries that have the most advanced AI, and there'll be other countries that don't have the most advanced AI. And there's a whole conversation there about equity to access to the latest AI, and is that going to influence children and their opportunity when it comes to education, or their ability to engage with the latest tools that's going to support their learning. And if that continues over a period of 5-10 years, is that going to have a significant impact on kids in one country being able to be smarter or have more opportunities to kids in other countries? Whether that be kids in countries where there is specifically geopolitical friction between, for example, the US, which is that has probably 90% of the AI models, to countries obviously where they're not getting on, through to countries that may not be able to afford access to those AI models in the technology that they're using. So in many cases, access to AI and the AI models are free. It's free at the moment to use all of those models, but that isn't sustainable in the long term just because of the cost of the hardware, the cost of the energy, the cost of all those other sorts of things. So companies are going to have to monetize those platforms at some point in time, and that's going to create issues when it comes to equity and access to those models, and access to learning, and issues around widening the digital divide. And I think it's just as educators, I think it's something that you need to be aware of. I think is within international education, it's a movement. There's a very transitory workforce moving from different schools, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this access and equity and AI nationalism play out in the next few years on schools and on learners, but also may have an influence in terms of what schools people want to teach at. If there are specific restrictions around this, it is a game-changing technology. But globally, as I said, there is a global consensus on the speed of development outpacing governance, and most countries are playing catch up. The EU AI Act is trying to grasp that and have the first mover advantage. So they hope that by being the first mover and coming to regulation and setting the standard really, really high, every other country is going to fall into place and follow a similar sort of regulatory structure, for them to maintain influence around the world, much like they did with the GDPR. As I said, in the UK, with the principles-based approach, it's not as rigid. In the US, I think you're going to get quite a lax approach in terms of regulation, and specifically with the Trump government of being clear in terms of, right, well, it's all around innovation, reduction in regulation. I don't think they'll be as irresponsible as to have no guidelines, but I think there will be guidelines that perhaps mimic principles-based approach that we're seeing in the UK, albeit less so on some of the requirements around it. So I think it's going to be very interesting in terms of how that happens. We have this thing called human in the loop as a safeguard, and this is an evolving area that schools really have to consider. So the way that regulation is going, including the EU AI Act, is that as a school, as a deployer of AI, you are making decisions around what technology to be using, and you are, or there consequently, you are responsible for any sort of issues that creates, because you should be able to understand what the risks are, and you should be able to mitigate those particular risks. And what human in the loop is around a safeguard where it is saying that there needs to be someone or people who are overseeing the use of AI. They are ultimately responsible, and they need to have an understanding of both the input and the output of using an AI platform, whatever that AI platform may mean. So in the context of a classroom, typically, currently, or forever, the teacher has been responsible for the input or the output. They've been responsible for their lesson planning, what resources they're going to use, whether it be a blackboard with chalk, whether it be a whiteboard with pens, whether it be an overhead projector with acetates, all the way through to the different EdTech platforms that are being used at the moment in time. The decision around what resources to be used are very much dependent on the teacher making an interpretation of, well, if I use these resources, it's going to be better engaged in my class. My students are going to learn better with this model, whether it be analog or whether it be digital. And the teacher can make the decision in terms of the risks of using those particular curriculum resources. So you've always had a human in the loop within the classroom. Moving forward with AI, the thinking is no different, but actually the reality and the impact is sort of a bit greater. Is that there's a narrative that has been a narrative that has been talked about and modeled, where the teacher is responsible for the input and the output of using AI within the classroom. The teacher has to police, which different AI is being used. Is the AI hallucinating? Is there any potentially bias or discrimination being created by the AI that they're choosing to use, and be able to react to that within the classroom? So actually, on the regulatory perspective, in terms of the expectations of schools, which is around understanding the AI, classify it into buckets, work out what the risks are. The responsibility isn't stopping at the leadership. It percolates down to the use in the classroom, and a school needs to have a mechanism of understanding where AI is being used across the curriculum, with all the students and all the teachers, have a point person or point team to understand the risks that the use of AI is creating, or whether there are issues around the different bits of AI that have been chosen, and that needs to come directly from the teachers. And UNESCO have come up with a competency framework to support this, not only around the thinking of human as a loop, but also what competencies do we require of teachers if this is going to occur. Or not if it's going to occur, that it is going to occur, that it is being used, but essentially it does enhance or evolve the role of the teacher, because now a teacher is being told, if you're following this model or you're following the regulations basically say that the teacher is responsible for understanding the outputs where they are deciding to use AI in the classroom. If you have teachers who don't want to use AI, then obviously they're not responsible for those things. But in many cases, at a leadership level, schools are making decisions around the whole school use of AI. And consequently, in doing so, they are putting certain responsibilities on teachers that those teachers may not be aware of. So what UNESCO is saying in terms of this AI competency framework, and there's one for the teachers and then one for the students, and the training course I showed you at the very beginning that we've created with 22 modules, considers actually aspects of this rubric to support teachers being aware of what they should be looking at, But essentially, you have a number of different aspects here, and then you have this rubric of acquisition, deepening, and creating, and what the expectations at each stage for teachers in the classroom when it comes to the use of AI. So there's quite a few considerations for a school at this moment in time that many schools aren't really thinking about in the calendar year within the EU of the things that they need to be planning for, and also the liabilities that they are accepting by just being based in the EU. But likewise, as I said, whilst it's very black and white within the EU, these things are generally required in every country that has evolving standards or laws around AI, and essentially it's placing the obligation on the school to make decisions and to evaluate the risks of the AI, put them in buckets, make sure staff are trained, and make sure that those people who you are asking to use the AI, staff, students, parents, etc., understands the risks to them of using the AI, that they have confidence, or you can demonstrate confidence to those stakeholder groups that you have evaluated the AI at a functional level, at a technical level, and then there are contracts in place between you and those providers of AI, these big firms, that not only protect you contractually as a school, but protect the rights in EU law when we look at the EU AI Act, from any risks or damage associated with their personal data or the influence of the AI on their behavior. So it's quite a significant area, but there's a lot to it. But it's I think my sort of warning to schools now is that you're not even thinking about these things that in February 2025 are coming into law. August 2025 there's another milestone, and in August 2026 there's a really significant milestone. To help you out with if you go to the 9 website, and on the first I'll show you here. Actually, this is just taking me away from my deck, but if you come here into 9, come to solutions, come to AI in education, we have a whole load of independent analysis of AI, all very research driven. So just as a hub of getting people thinking about at a leadership level, what are the implications from an ethics and governance perspective. We're sort of focused on that lens, not necessarily on the pedagogy and how AI can make our kids smarter or engaging. So it's a really good resource for you that is independent and is research driven to help you have a conversation. And that video that I showed you from Twitter at the very beginning is really there to provoke conversation at a leadership level about the risks, the implications of AI, setting the scene. We have laws, there are ethics, there are governance issues that we need to consider. How do we go about doing that? And so generally when we're looking at the requirements for schools, you need in the EU, through that EU lens, August 2025, who is the person reading and evaluating the AI documents? We have a solution for that where we've done that for schools. So all of these privacy notices, terms and conditions, AI documents, functional and technical level, we evaluate these documents and we present that back within the traffic light system of these are the risks, these are the issues, these are things that you need to be aware of and addressing. You need to understand the compliance and legal obligations. You need to have a process for reviewing all of those documents. So the EdTech in your school, how much of it uses AI? What are those risks and issues? Not only at a governance level, but you need to be in a position that you can communicate those to your teaching community. So come August 2025, if you aren't communicating how you have evaluated what the risks are, if you aren't telling your teachers what they should be looking out for in terms of the human in the loop, what should they be looking for in terms of potential bias, discrimination, input, output of what's going into the AI and what's coming out, then they would potentially be quite right to say, well, we're not using it because they have obligations in law within the EU around policing that. And then oversight with all the how AI is being used across your community, how are you aggregating all of the data points to provide you with some oversight that you can make informed decisions at an organizational level when it comes to AI. And these are all the things that we specialize in helping schools and we have solutions, all those sorts of things. But the most important thing for you at this moment in time, if you haven't had these conversations, then go away and have these conversations at a leadership level, at a board level. How are you going to address these? How are you going to be compliant? How are you going to discharge your responsibilities? How do you give confidence to your parents, to your teachers, to your learners that actually you have considered the risks around AI and you have a plan to ethically use it within your school? Because it's not just the ethics, you have that legal side as well. I hope that ECIS, I'll give them the copy of this deck and they can push this out also in addition to the recording, so you have links to everything. when it comes to data privacy protection, as I said, it intersects very, very nicely into AI, no matter where you are. But you're going to see, more of an interface moving forward, and data protection laws are going to have more teeth to it. So just thinking about when you bring together AI and data, which happened in that Twitter video at the very beginning, plus, there's a multiplier effect in terms of the damage that can be created in using AI. And essentially both laws require you to be forecasting what the issues are and have plans to mitigate those. So there's quite a significant undertaking, and whoever is responsible for privacy and protection in your school needs to be part of this, like an AI working group. And an AI working group is not a singular person. It needs to be someone that can look at it from an AI perspective, from a privacy perspective, from a pedagogy perspective. That's a really important part of it. You've got contractual implications, and you've also got technology implications. And the technical side actually is like the last area. The working group really needs to be focused on it from a sort of pedagogy and the privacy side and the contract side before you even get the technology. And one of the concerns I have with working with many schools is this is just seen as a technical problem, and it's handed over to the tech director, when in actual fact it's actually a pedagogy problem. And that's where the problem sits, and that's where someone needs to take responsibility for it, because the tech person can only do so much. They can't do the human in the loop input output at a classroom level. As I said, contracts are changing. You're probably going to see litigation more so around this area and the misuse of data. Again, looking through the lens of that video that we looked at at the very beginning, and around the privacy and the oversight, there's a problem there that schools need to be thinking about how they're going to be addressing that. And lastly, when I come to, I don't want to dwell upon the more sort of technical components, but AI as a risk when it comes to cybersecurity, we're going to see a significant uptake or increase in cyber attacks, because at the moment, when it comes to cyber attacks, it requires a human to identify vulnerabilities, and that vulnerability could be, through phishing, in terms of finding vulnerabilities in members of staff who you can convince to click on a link or download something, all the way through to the technical vulnerabilities of identifying gaps in IT systems. At the moment, all that requires a human to go about doing that, identify the vulnerability, be able to create code to mitigate, to sort of navigate their way through systems. AI can do a lot of that thing. At this moment in time, it can already do a lot of those things for itself. But as the technology evolves, we see the friction between a successful cyber attack probably going from 6 weeks to 6 minutes, right? That's the way that I'm describing it. And if you're people who are the front line, your members of staff, that are going to be your first line of defense, and actually the ones that are probably most likely to be responsible for incurring that attack. So you need to be thinking about the training that you're providing on that cyber side, as well as the overall AI. I won't go into some of these details, we're sort of getting more technical, but going to a cloud-based system isn't really going to offer you that many more protections than going from having systems that have servers locally. Having a cloud is going to, the cloud-based systems provides an attacker, once they've gained control of a computer, a laptop, and a MacBook, access to probably more data. So, and we've got some more stats on that, but I won't dwell upon them on today's webinar. So on this the sort of lasting thought here is that the teachers are like the first line of defense and the last line of defense when it comes to AI use in schools, and you really need to be thinking at a leadership level about how you're going to support your teachers to really understand the ethics of AI, governance of it, how data can be used in those platforms, how the output of that AI platform can have an influence on the learning profile or learning journey of children, how the output can influence discrimination or bias, as a whole range of other areas that need to be considered, because they are the ones ultimately that are going to be responsible for policing that in the classroom. And it is a is a human problem rather than a technical problem, and it is more than an ethical problem rather than a technical problem. As I said, like there's lots of information every week. We've got a new blog being posted in our AI Knowledge Hub every single week. So if you go on tomorrow, there's I can't remember what the topic is that's been issued today, but it's there. You have access to the AI curriculum that we have. That you can sign up for a trial for. It's called Academy LMS. The AI pathway is starting off 22 courses, beginner all the way through to safeguarding and child protection. There'll be more on there. We're going to do a course actually on AI and voice. So you just think about children speaking into an AI app and what is going on with their voice and whether that could lead to future issues, ethics and governance around that. There's a course coming on that. But we also have a pathway on cybersecurity, privacy, risk management, and tech ops. So hopefully that's been really useful. I see Rita, thank you for saying it's fascinating. Lots of people say actually taking this webinar, it's the same slide deck I've done quite a few times over the past month, and having your leadership just watch this webinar can give them some context about maybe what they should be thinking about. At a consultancy level, if you need us to have a conversation with you, or me, we do sort of those sorts of workshops as well at a governance and ethics. I can't tell you what Gen AI to be using or what apps to be using in your school, but I can tell you about everything else that is sort of the risks that you need to be managing. So with that, I'm going to open up if anyone has any questions or observations or just wants to share something with the rest of the team, then please do. Yeah, anyone have anything they want to say or any questions? Nope. Well, if you don't have anything, well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to to be here. Hopefully, if you want us or you want ECIS to sort of go down a different pathway when it comes to AI in terms of the things that we should be thinking about, then do feedback to ECIS and they'll let us know in terms of what sort of topics that you may want us to look at. We will probably do something on AI and safeguarding around ethics and governance and risks from what we are seeing at a technical level, not in terms of practice. We're saying like, as designated safeguarding leads, these are the sorts of things that maybe you need to be aware of. And in the meantime, if you need to get hold of Nine or want to learn anything more about what we do, then hopefully you know where we are. So yeah, thank you very much and have a good rest of your day. Cheers.
Thank you.